This is Justin Derby of Wildcat Spread 40, bringing you the Week 5 predictions of the Northwest Conference. Heading into Week 5 of the season, the Northwest Conference has been surprisingly good. Entering Week 5, there are 4 undefeated teams in the conference, with Whitworth being 4-0 and Linfield, Willamette, and Lewis and Clark all being 3-0. So with that, here are the predictions. First up on our list of games for Saturday is a matchup between Willamette and Sewanee. Sewanee on the season is 2-2, while Willamette is 3-0. Sewanee is a team that loves to run the ball, and based off the statistics, I would harbor a guess that they are an option-based team, as they average almost 335 yards per game on the ground for the season. And their defense is pretty solid on the season, giving up 17 points per game and 286 yards of offense per game. The main problem Sewanee has on their season is they only average 21 points per game. Their offense has a hard time putting points on the board, which is probably why they've lost twice already. That is not going to help them when they go up against Willamette. Their defense, although putting up solid numbers, has not faced an offense as explosive and dangerous as Willamette's, which leads the Northwest Conference in almost every single offensive stat you can think of. Total yards, points, third down conversion percentage, fourth down conversion percentage, passing yards per game, whatever you can think of. Willamette is the best in the conference at it so far this season. And I don't see Sewanee's defense being able to hold them down, especially with the rise of Josh Dean as Willamette's quarterback this year. Through 3 games, Josh Dean's completing 68% of his passes for 1,127 yards with 14 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. I don't see him. He hasn't shown any signs of slowing down so far this year, and I don't see Sewanee slowing him down on Saturday. The other thing that plays into Willamette's favor is that with Sewanee being such a run-heavy team and hardly passing the ball on the year, that actually plays into Willamette's defensive strengths. Willamette leads the Northwest Conference in rush defense, and they have forced a staggering 17 turnovers in 3 games. Just under 6 turnovers a game so far this season, forced by the Willamette defense. I don't see Sewanee having that much luck throwing the ball through the air if Willamette's run defense holds true to form. And because of that, I'm picking Willamette to win this game on Saturday. Next up on the list, we have Whitworth playing at Pacific, Oregon. Whitworth on the season is 4-0, while Pacific is 1-2. Now, Whitworth is a team that many people thought in the preseason, based off of how they finished last season, that Whitworth could contend for the Northwest Conference title this year. And at 4-0, so far they've been living up to those expectations, although not quite in the way I had imagined personally in the preseason. Many of times, people and I have said that Whitworth has the best collection of skilled players on offense in the conference besides Linfield. However, after 4 games, despite being the 3rd highest scoring team in the conference, Whitworth is dead last in the conference in yards of offense per game. Despite having great skill players such as Ronnie Thomas at running back, who has 539 yards and 7 touchdowns and 4.8 yards a carry, his 134.8 yards per game, making him top in the conference in rushing. And having wide receiver Jake DeGoyer, who after 4 games has 29 receptions for 469 yards and 5 touchdowns, averaging over 16 yards per catch. His receiving yard total making up over half of Whitworth's total passing yardage. Despite having such talented skill players such as them, their offense has had surprising difficulty putting up yards every game. On the defensive side of the ball, despite the fact that they don't record a lot of turnovers and sacks, and they give up almost 32 yards per game more than their offense averages, Whitworth's defense is 2nd in the conference in points per game allowed at this point in the season. So, because of this, and because of the fact that Pacific got their world rocked by Willamette last week, and Whitworth is about the same caliber team as Willamette, I'm going to have to say that Whitworth will beat Pacific on Saturday. And finally on the slate for this show, we have a matchup between Lewis and Clark and Puget Sound. Lewis and Clark is 3-0 on the season, while Puget Sound is 0-3 on the season and coming off another horrendous loss. Lewis and Clark last week impressed a lot of people by coming back from an early 10-0 deficit to rout McAlester 41-17. In that game, Lewis and Clark's offense, which was somewhat struggling in the first two games, finally started to show signs of life from last season, as they totaled 414 yards of offense for the game. Quarterback Keith Welch was sensational once again, going 24 of 35 for 312 yards of 2 touchdowns and no picks in that game, while also gathering up 26 yards and 2 touchdowns on 11 carries on the ground. And finally for Lewis and Clark, in the third game of the season, they got something going from a running back, as Curtis Shirey totaled 82 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries. And through that game, after that early deficit, Lewis and Clark's defense once again played a superb game. As far as this matchup goes, I see this going completely in Lewis and Clark's favor. Although Puget Sound puts up a lot of yards passing per game, second in the conference, just behind Willamette, averaging 340 yards a game through the air, Lewis and Clark's defense is the #1 defense in the Northwest Conference when points per game allowed and yards per game allowed. On the other side, Lewis and Clark is a very efficient passing team, and Puget Sound's defense is absolutely horrid, the very worst in the conference, giving up 47 points per game and nearly 580 yards of offense per game, which includes an average of 360 yards per game allowed on the ground. For Lewis and Clark, their offense has been great throwing the ball, but they had been struggling to run the ball thus far. And a matchup against Puget Sound might be the kind of game Lewis and Clark needs to get the running game established and try to regain that dominant form of offense that they had last season. Last season, Puget Sound almost upset Lewis and Clark on the road at Lewis and Clark's homecoming in a 31-28 loss. This year, I don't think any such fairy tales will come even close to passing, especially with Lewis and Clark's improved defense. So, because of everything I've listed above and that, I'm picking Lewis and Clark to win on Saturday. And stay tuned, fans, for coming out soon will be my preview of the Linfield Pacific Lutheran game, which I have deemed as the game of the week for the Northwest Conference. This is Justin Derby of Wildcat Spread 40, and these have been my predictions for the Northwest Conference in Week 5.